Okay, I mentioned I was going to do a video on the Ban and Restricted announcement that they are increasing the date. The date they've chosen is October 21st. It's now 4 days past the original announcement of October 7th. They announced it yesterday on the 9th. So 2 days after they originally were supposed to have that Ban and Restricted announcement originally, they've now taken another look at the way the game is, and obviously something caught their eye that they were keeping an eye on to begin with and went, no, there's something that needs to be done here. So first, let's talk about the date in particular. They choose like a week or even the weekend after a set is released for these rotating ban announcements, which is a horrible state of affairs for these bans. When a new set comes out, you don't know where it's going to land until a couple weeks into it, and then you'll know a little bit more of it. So moving it to October 21st, I hope that they take that date and continue that forward, where it comes 2 to 3 weeks after a set is released. Then they can let the meta kind of settle and see where problems are, and if they've printed cards or haven't printed enough answers for certain cards, then that's something that they can address. And I think that's part of the reason why this new Ban and Restricted announcement has come out. There's certain cards that with rotation cannot be answered. The other thing that has come from rotation that we don't normally see during a rotation is there was no change to the format. And when you have a rotation happen and have absolutely nothing change in the format, you still have the Esper control deck, you still have the aggro red deck, you still have the elementals that are huge. It's just become this stale environment, so a shakeup needs to be done, and that's one of the reasons why this is more of emergency ban territory. They know something is wrong with the state of the game, and this announcement will let them take care of that. Now, why didn't they come out a couple days later and do an instant ban? I think part of it is logistics. They just launched Arena, and they're still working through a lot of the bugs when it comes to Arena. It's fully launched, it's out of beta, but they're still having bugs and issues. As of today, they had an update patch on the game that increased stability, and because people were having these dropped games, having problems connecting and stuff like that. And I think that patch they did today, I've been seeing a lot of feedback from that patch saying it's drastically improved the state of the game and able to play it on other machines and stuff like that and not have as many problems. Now, the ban, I think part of it is Modern, but this announcement came from the Magic Esports Twitter account, and unfortunately Modern is not a huge part of the esports scene for Magic the Gathering yet. Yes, they have MTGO or MTG Online, and that is part of where they get Modern gameplay. But most Modern gameplay is done in paper and not in a esport scenario. So I don't think Modern's going to be the direct target of a lot of what's going to happen with this ban. And that's mainly because of the account that it's come from. So now it comes down to what did they need to have happen with a shakeup over rotation that didn't happen. And there's quite a few cards. There's probably a good list of 20 cards that are problematic in the format right now, and I'm going to go through a bunch of them as we can. So the first one here is a Modern only card. It was in Modern Horizons, and this is the second true problem that's come out of that set. And I'm talking Modern first because everything else is standard. Now, this is Urza Lohi Artificer. He's 2 blue and 2 generic. He's a 1/4 human artificer, legendary creature. When he enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 construct, artifact, creature token. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each other artifact you control, which is the same thing as the current standard Karn creates. Tap an untapped artifact you control, add 1 blue mana. Well, that is kind of broken because there's a lot of ways you can make tokens, artifact tokens in particular, for free. You have the Mirror, which I believe are an artifact creature, and they will, yeah, it kind of shuts things down, especially when you can start free casting things. When you add in free casting, discounted things for artifacts, now you're taking all these discounted artifacts, you're putting them in for free, and now they're making mana on top of that. So that's where a generic problem comes from this card. And for 5 mana, shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. So the reason why you shuffle your library is so you can't stack the top card, because if you could stack the top card, this effect would be ultimately completely broken. And because this is all one effect, you can't interrupt halfway through the effect to put something on top through scrying methods or other ways. So where Modern is, this is a card that is a target right now, and I know that's something that's being watched, and a lot of people are talking about it as one of the possible ban potentials. Okay, well, the second card I have on my list would be Questing Beast. This won't get a ban, I can say it right now, but this has become a problem in the game. Before rotation happened, we had the 3 green champion card where it couldn't be blocked by creatures of power 2 or less. That thing in itself was a problem because of that ability. Now, Questing Beast is 1 more mana, but man, did they ever pack a punch for that 1 more mana. So at a rare standard, you had 3 green and you had couldn't be blocked by creatures 2 or less, power 2 or less, and it was a 5/4. Now, for 1 more mana, they're giving you Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste. That Haste is the important part on this Questing Beast that I do want to touch on. If it didn't have Haste, this thing would be answerable and would be a lot more easier to deal with. The combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented, meaning no fog effects will work with this on the board. Whenever Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to a target planeswalker that players control. Now, why was this printed? This was printed because of the drastic amount of planeswalkers we had in War of the Spark, and they wanted to bring something in that would effectively nullify those planeswalkers. However, for 4 mana, they put too much into this card. This card should easily be 6, if not 8 mana normally. Now, their restriction on it is they made it legendary, and that legendary does not mean a thing when it comes down to it. It's a good card, it's an expensive card, but I don't see this getting a banhammer now. Maybe later. Even now, it's not that great to see a banhammer. Part of the reason why this is such a good card is because people are reliably getting it down on turn 3. And if they went first, you maybe have 3 mana and you're trying to create a board state. They get this thing down and you have to answer it right when it's down. And at that turn 3, you don't have anything with the power that's greater than 2 to begin with in most cases. Unless you're playing a green Stompy deck. And this thing is just going to mow through them. If you've put down a 3-casted Planeswalker, it's gone. If you saved your 3 mana for maybe a counter spell or some sort of removal, great. But otherwise, this thing's going to get through. This thing's going to step over any small death touches that you've maybe put down to try and stave off combat. And that's where this thing becomes a true and utter problem. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the future this is a card that does get targeted for a ban, possibly. We'll see what happens. This is going to be around for the next 2 years, so it's hard to say where this is going to land. The next card I have up here, Time Wipe. Time Wipe. This is a board wipe. And one of the reasons why I put this down on this list is it's 1 blue, 2 white, and 2 generic. Good casting cost for board wipe, 5 mana, that's appropriately casted. However, it's the return a creature you control to owner's hand, then destroy all creatures. And the problem with this is that there has been way too many creatures that are in standard currently with an ETB or enter the battlefield triggering effect that you want to bounce them. You want to have them back to your hand so you can play and get that enter ability again. Or like a Hydroid Krasis, where you can recast it for the life gain and the card draw. So this is why this is something that's on the list. This, once again, I don't think will get the ban, but it is something that is talked about here and there. There's not much more I can really talk with this one. The next one I have is Chandra's Awakened Inferno. 2 red, 4 generic. It's a 6 loyalty legendary planeswalker Chandra. This is another card that came out of the core set, M20. This spell can't be countered. To put that on a planeswalker this powerful is drawing a line in the sand that's saying 6 casted planeswalkers are going to win you a game, as they should. Now, this cannot be countered. It still dies to removal. However, you need priority to be able to let it die to removal. The +2 creates an emblem, and emblems cannot be reasonably dealt with in the game. So as an emblem ability at a +2, that is where the problem is with this card. You have Nicobolus that copies and that can make any ability other planeswalkers have for the same cost. And you also have Chandra's Regulators that lets you double up this ability when it's used. So between those 2 cards, there's almost too many answers or too many things that you get more value out of this card than what you should. Because there's so many more things that addition to this card, it makes it absolutely a complete and utter out the window game. Doubling up those emblems each round or even once is devastating, because not only does it put you on a clock, but you still have to gain enough life and offset that damage to be able to win the game. And in a lot of cases, by turn 6, by the time this is hitting the board, your life total is below 10, and you're going to see it plummet right off the bat. You're done. Not only that, but the -3 ability, where it's a 3 damage on to each non-elemental creature. In M20, there was so many elementals, this wasn't a big thing, but now you have so many more creatures that are not elementals. I don't even think there was a single elemental in Throne of Eldraine. They were a night heavy and fey heavy set. So this 3 damage is devastating to a lot of creatures and a lot of board states. So that 3 damage will take out pretty much an entire board. Then she can also deal X damage to target creature or planeswalker and exile it if they were to die that turn. So this could be a scenario where you've done a bunch of damage, or you do 1 damage with her and then you do the rest of the damage with something else. That's something I haven't seen happen, but it is a possibility for those people that are out there, and you maybe want to look a little bit more with that loyalty, how you spend it. But the exiling it, I think it's great. I think her -X ability is phenomenal when it comes to planeswalker control. In a lot of cases, you're going to use that to try and get rid of something that's problematic on the board. But the fact that she has the can't be countered and gets an emblem, +2 emblem, makes it really hard. And this one is a toss-up. Do they ban it? I doubt it. I don't think this is going to see anything, because once again, this was the flagship of Core 20. So I don't think you're going to see a ban here, but it could be something that comes down the pipeline later on down the line. Now, one card I've had a huge problem with since it was spoiled is Teferi Time Reveler. It's gotten a lot better since Teferi, Hero of Dominaria rotated out of standard. However, this 3-casted 4 loyalty planeswalker, 1 blue, 1 white, 1 generic, each opponent can cast spells only any time they could cast a sorcery. So you can't cast spells off your turn. You can only do it on your turn. This has become a kind of a problem, but not at the same time. Teferi kind of has had a completely flip-flop of the ability of what he was doing. Where before you were shutting down certain archetypes to stopping what you want to do, now it's you're shutting down Simic Flash and other decks like that, so you cannot be countered. That cannot be countered ability makes it even harder. There's the Feather deck. Feather is another one. I actually don't even have it on this list, and Feather is something that should actually probably be on this list. But this is one of those cards where it can go either way. Do they ban them? I doubt it. They have such a drive to have Teferi in standard right now, especially with Core Set 2021 that will come out next year, is revolving around Teferi. So because this is becoming a flagship card, flagship character of the franchise, this card will never see a ban, and we're stuck with it for now. However, he isn't as oppressive as he was before rotation, so that's a good thing. Blood for Bones. This is a card I could see getting the banhammer when they do this on the 21st. This is an uncommon, and part of it is the way the wording happened with this. So for 1 black and 3 generic and an additional cost, you sacrifice a creature. Now, you return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, then return another creature card from your graveyard to your hand. What this should have been is, as an additional cost to cast this spell, exile a creature, then at resolution, that creature goes to the graveyard. That's how it should have been worded. But because it's sacrifice a creature, the sacrifice creature being part of the spell, it is now in the graveyard when this spell goes onto the stack, so it is a targetable entity at that point, and that's why this card is so problematic, and I do want to see this card get a banhammer because of that. When they made the card, I don't think they thought that closely of the rules for it, and they were thinking, oh, they'll sack it to bring something else back. And they're not going to use it to repeatedly have something entering the battlefield over and over and over again, mainly because there's other cards that do that. But the real benefit of this is now you have Agent of Treachery, which is another card that I wouldn't mind seeing a ban. It steals anything on your opponent's board, lands, artifact, any permanent, and so what people are doing is they have an Agent of Treachery down, they Blood for Bones it, so they sacrifice it, they bring it right back in, and you steal another creature, or another land, or something. So it keeps this entering phase, and then there's other ways that this spell can come back from the graveyard, so then you keep this loop cycle going with it, and it really creates a problematic deck in that sense. And then you're also bringing a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So you're getting the added effect of not only are you getting the creature that's on the board to repeat its Enter the Battlefield trigger, but now you're bringing something else back that you need from the graveyard, and it's just too valuable of a card. And thankfully it's an uncommon, but because it's an uncommon, it's everywhere, and it's something that is problematic in the current standard. And with the bans that they're looking at, if they don't ban this along with everything else, this will be the next thing that comes up, and then people have another problem. So, you know, how do you fix that? And that's why that's there. And then I also have Agent of Treachery, which is the 2 blue, 5 generic, 2/3. This is another M20 card, human rogue. When he enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. And that's permanent, even if he leaves. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. I've put this card in a cloner deck, and it gets absolutely hilarious when I draw my entire deck. And then you add in Jason. Yeah, you draw your entire deck, you have Jason, you win the game. So, because of how many different ways there are to cheat this into the battlefield currently, this has become such a problematic card. 7 mana means nothing to this card. It might as well be 2, because that's how fast people are getting this card out on the battlefield. And that's where the Blood for Bones scenario is. If they get rid of the Blood for Bones, that's one thing that stops this from coming in a couple turns earlier. There are other things, but they're 5 casted instead of 4 casted. And from 4 mana to 5 mana is a big difference when it does come down to the standard gameplay currently. So where do you fall on this? It's hard to say. I don't think this is going to get a ban, but it's something else that's going to be on the radar. And I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I'm not going to be surprised if it doesn't. The next one, Chandra's Spitfire. This card absolutely needs a ban. I do not care what anyone says about this card. This card is a problem card. It was a problem card from day one. It was a problem card when it was spoiled. I saw this card and went, are you guys nuts? This is way overpowered for 3 mana. This is a 1/3 elemental, another card for M20. It's got flying, and whenever our opponent is dealt non-combat damage, Chandra's Spitfire gets +3/+0 until end of turn. So you lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt, shock, 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 and this thing's getting +3 for every time you hit someone for something that's not combat worthy. Tim effects, anything. There's so many different ways that you can trigger this ability. It's absolutely insane. And the fact that this thing comes down on turn 3, if you do not answer it when it comes down, you're dead. Plain and simple. There is no coming back if you do not answer it right then and there, and that's why this card needs a ban. This thing is so oppressive in the mono red deck. It's not needed in that mono red deck. Does it alleviate some pressure from that mono red deck? Yes. This card is not needed in that deck. It's already OP without this card, and it needs to go away. Then there is Cavalcade of Calamity. When this was spoiled, I went, I know I can build a deck around this, and I didn't say at that point it would be completely broken or anything like that, because you got to get it down and you got to get it stick. Now, because of Chandra's Spitfire, this card is seeing so much more play alongside of that. At 2 mana, this is an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with power 1 or less attacks, Cavalcade deals 1 damage to that player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. So you have a board of 3/1/1s on the board. This thing you swing with those 3/1/1s that deals 3 damage. But each instance triggers the Spitfire. So now that 3 damage becomes 12 in one swing. And that's why this card is so oppressive, especially alongside the Spitfire. I don't expect this one to get a ban, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I don't think it's going to, especially with the new Torben that's out there. Now, with the new Torben, now you have a different problem. And Torben is, every time a red source deals damage, it deals 2 additional damage. But it is forecasted. It's a 2/4. So instead of this doing 1 damage, it does 3 per attack. So that's where it... And in mono red, you get 1 mana, 2... Like, it creates this perfect curve out in that mono red deck. And that perfect curve out is not really something you want to see in a aggro deck. You want these aggro decks to stumble and fail every once in a while. If you always have a perfect curve out in it, there's no stopping it. You go back to Temur Battle Rage when you had the turn 3 20 damage combo that they were doing with green, red, I think it was black, I'm not entirely sure, it was back in the cons block. But it just created this turn 3 combo that would just kill someone right out. And in a lot of cases, you weren't able to stop it. So this is something that's on the fence. I don't know if it's going to go or stay. Field of the Dead is the #1 target of this emergency ban. Why? There is no solid answers for this card. Field of Ruin was printed originally in Ixalan, and it rotated with this last rotation, and Field of the Dead then became a very oppressive card, and that's why this emergency ban will be for this card and this card alone. Now the question is, do other cards go with it? Let's hope, because we need some sort of stability with the state of Standard currently, and like I said earlier in the video, rotation did not create that shakeup that it should have. Field of the Dead is an absolute powerhouse of a card. When this was printed, this was another one I was like, I don't know. I think this should have been legendary. I think this card is going to be touching a little bit far. And what makes this card so good is it's not legendary. It can go in any deck right now. You could even run this in mono red. And because of that, it makes it so much better. So it comes in the battlefield tapped. It only adds colorless mana, but when you have 7 or more lands in play with different names, whenever another land enters play, or this, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. You have 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these on the board, you're creating that many more zombies. And you add in Yarok, which is a 5-casted elemental right now that doubles enter the battlefield triggers. It just gets out of control. This card is 100% getting banned in a few days. If you have copies of it, do get rid of them, because it will get the ban hammer. This is something that's going to end up showing up in Modern after it gets banned from Standard. So I don't see copies of this card actually going down that much, because it's going to get the ban. It's going to show up in Modern somewhere. And this can easily go in an artifact deck. There's so many different colorless lands. You put this in a Tron deck and you're laughing, because you've already got three different lands there. You've got this and whatever else you want to put in there. You'll get more for your value there. The other card that has been very problematic is Golos Tireless Pilgrim. It's a 5-casted artifact creature legendary scout. It's a 3/5. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card, put that card into the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So what people are doing is you put this in and you go and fetch the Field of the Dead. That Field of the Dead then enters, triggers, and everything else. And then you play this in a 5-color deck right now, and it's not hard to mana fix those 5 colors. Especially when you're able to fetch a land out of this that enters the battlefield. You can go and get a Gateway Plaza right now. Yeah, you pay the 1 mana for it, but this will make it even better. For 1 of each color and 2 generic, you exile the top 3 cards of your library. Then you may play them this turn without paying their mana cost. That also includes lands entering the battlefield. Now, you still have you can only put in 1 land unless you have another card saying you can put an additional land in, which the only thing right now is the Gazer, but that's from your hand, not additional lands, so it doesn't really work that well with that. There's a few ways to shut this down, and one of the main ways is with Karn. Another one is with Ashiok. Ashiok is probably more reliable than Karn, but Ashiok and Karn together really does shut this down. But why do you need to have 2 cards to shut down 1? And that's the main problem with this card. Because it's 5 generic, any deck can run it. This has become a really big problematic card. If they get rid of Field of the Dead, does this card go away? No, it does not, because you're still free casting with it. This is another card that I expect to get the ban, but I don't know if Wizards of the Coast will pull the trigger on it. And that is where we're wrapping it up here. Will they pull the trigger on Golos? Who knows? They've done this in the past where they get rid of 1 card and go, oh, no, we should have got rid of this one also. So it's hard to say. There's multiple cards that do need to get banned from Standard because they're making the game very oppressive. If they get rid of Golos and Field of the Dead, does it fix the format? No. That's the problem. So does it create a little bit more of a scenario where people can maybe deck build? Maybe. But I don't believe Golos and Field of the Dead are the only answers they have to get rid of. They're problematic cards that are very hard to deal with. Field of the Dead in particular. It would be nice for them to print something else that will deal with these a lot easier, but when that happens, that'll be the day. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching my Banned and Restricted update video, which will be, I'll cover that on the 21st when they do the Banned and Restricted. Don't forget to catch up my weekly video that I do for this week in Magic the Gathering. There's a bunch new products that were announced today, along with other stories that are coming out of the Magic the Gathering world. So do tune into that tomorrow, and I will catch you guys on a live stream or thereafter. Thank you, and have yourselves a great night or day.